Alright there, hello. So in this video I'd like to explain React hooks and how React hook is a much simpler way on how we can write the state and how to essentially write much simpler code so that when we go into those big applications that we write, we can debug the code much better and it's much easier to write. So currently right now I have a counter. Every single time you click this button, it counts. So it counts the amount of times you've clicked the button. The way I've done this right here is through the class. So through classes. So essentially, this is how people used to write the state in React. So essentially, we'd first have to write a constructor, a super, and then declare our state. Then we would have to bind it to a function that we'd later write here, and then we would actually write the code that makes the app, right? So now this is very simple for the small application, and it's very easy to follow. But now you can start to imagine if we wrote a much bigger application with more complex features, how keeping track of all of this and multiple other components with different states would be very complicated and very hard. So in React, in 16.2, they actually came out with a much simpler way to write all of this. So essentially, what right now I'm going to show you what is that much simpler way. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna delete all the code here. So I just need to import React. So essentially, I just need to import use state. Okay, now that I've imported a new state, I will need to write my function. So my function, oops, no capitals, but yeah. So my function will be called counter, so I can later export it. And the first thing that I actually want to do is declare my state variable. So const, and the state that I will be declaring would be first count, and then the way I declare the state will be use a function, so that would be set count. And now to actually declare my actual state, so I would have to grab this use state, and then after grabbing use state, I can set the state to whatever I want it to be. So let's set the state to 0. Now I can actually write the actual code for the application. So I am going to write down a return statement, and then that return statement will return a few divs. Well, actually just one div. And I will try to write down essentially what I wrote down before. So we will have a pdiv to keep track of the state. You clicked me, or actually you clicked, and then the state, which is count. We will keep track of that. You click me times. So and there we go. So we have to prove that that's the state. We can change the state to 1, and it'll say you click me 1 time, and it'll say you click me 2 times. So yeah, so essentially that is the state. Now I want to set it that every time someone clicks a button on my application, it will tell that person that how many times they've clicked that button. So for this, I have to create a button and an onClick function with set count in order to add to count. So first thing we need to do is create a button. Oops. Right. And in the button, it will just say click me like I said before. So now we have to just do the on click function. Then this will be set count. And there we go, count plus 1. So this should work. And there we go. So essentially, as you can see, the code is much simpler. I will do a side-to-side comparison, but we can also change this to 2. So every time you click, but obviously we want to track the amount of times someone clicks. So we will do a side-to-side comparison of the code in a bit. So, oops. So actually, so let me just quickly copy and paste this code, and then what we'll do is we'll just track back so we can do a side-to-side comparison. Sorry, this is gonna take a while. We're gonna do a side-to-side comparison of the code and just see how much shorter it actually is now, and how much simpler it is to follow. Okay, so there we go. Here is the original code, and now we will quickly just put this. Actually, we'll just look at both codes. So remove the console. So this is the original code that we use with classes. You can see how it's a bit more complicated. Usually when I write with classes, I tend to forget to bind. I also sometimes don't write the functions properly. Also having to remember this dot state. Now in a very simple application that we built here, using classes is completely fine because it's very easy. It's still easy to track, but for the more complicated applications, it would be better to use hooks because hooks are simpler. And when you get to bigger and more complicated apps, you might have actual problems with debugging code and so on and so forth. So developers should start using hooks if they're not using hooks at the moment. I know it did come out a while ago, but yeah. So this is my video on hooks and how to use them. Uh, there there is more detailed things. So there's another hook that you can use, which is use effect. Essentially, that is to get, if you want to get data from a server. Sorry, not server. If you want to get data from an API, so yeah. But generally, hooks is a much easier way to write React code, and at the end of the day, I think that's what coding should be about. Writing in the simplest way so we can then debug it, change the code without having any problems, and then when future developers come along to do the same project, it's much easier for them to understand the code. And yeah, so that's the video. Thank you very much.